Good evening. The former Conservative Defence Secretary Liam Fox has urged David Cameron to allow cabinet members to campaign for the UK to leave the European Union without having to resign. Dr Fox has confirmed that he'll be voting to leave in the forthcoming referendum. But the Prime Minister's approach to renegotiating Britain's EU membership received support today from one of his predecessors, Sir John Major. Our political correspondent Chris Mason reports.
It's 43 years since Ted Heath signed us up to what is now the EU. In the next 2 years, we'll be asked whether we want to stay. This former Prime Minister says we should.
If we vote to stay out, then we are out and we will have to get on with it and face the consequences. Would we be as safe? No. Would we be as well off? No. Would we be as influential? No.
David Cameron's been in Brussels trying to persuade fellow European leaders that the UK needs a new deal with the EU. He knows that back home some grumble that they'll say no and his demands are trivial. So what exactly does the Prime Minister hope to achieve from his renegotiation? David Cameron wants to protect the powers of Westminster. He also wants to help businesses be more competitive by cutting regulations, to protect countries like the UK that have kept their own currencies, and with his plan to stop EU migrants being able to claim in-work benefits for 4 years, to be seen to be doing something about immigration, something John Major endorses.
It is not common sense to sweep into countries more people than we can provide for if they are sick, than we can house or we can educate.
Some in the cabinet, like Ian Duncan Smith, are not exactly big fans of the EU. Today, a former cabinet colleague said they should be able to keep their jobs and campaign to leave, just as he already is.
For me, two things had to happen to want to stay in the European Union. One was a fundamental change in Britain's relationship with the European Union, but more importantly, a change in direction for the European Union itself, away from the concept of ever closer union and towards a much more independent and looser association of sovereign states, and that's clearly not going to happen.
At the last European referendum in 1975, Labour cabinet ministers were allowed to campaign on both sides of the debate. David Cameron, though, has so far avoided saying whether he'll allow that precedent to be repeated.
And we can join Chris now live in Westminster this evening. Is the Prime Minister going to be able to maintain the line he's kept so far, Chris?
That is the big question tonight, because whilst at the moment he can make the argument that he can keep a big tent approach around the cabinet table as far as views on the EU are concerned, because the renegotiation is continuing and all of the cabinet can acknowledge that for the time being that is worth pursuing. Once that renegotiation is complete and the Prime Minister, as he hopes, can make the argument that we should stay in the EU, there is likely to be some around his cabinet table who think exactly the opposite. And it's not just Liam Fox who's arguing that the Prime Minister at that point should suspend cabinet responsibility. The senior Conservative backbencher Graham Brady also making that argument, saying it would be morally right, it'd be catastrophically wrong to do the opposite. It gives you some sense of just how much is at stake for the Prime Minister in holding his party together on this.
Chris Mason in Westminster, thank you.